You can go to our website, democracynow.org, to watch it again. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Obama has given his first Oval Office address, and it's about the oil that is gushing out of the seafloor in the Gulf of Mexico. We are talking today about how the government and the corporation are dealing with this and where we go from here. Our guest, Monique Harden, attorney and co-director of Advocates for Environmental Human Rights, Amory Lovins, chief scientist at Rocky Mountain Institute, and Michael Brune, executive director of Sierra Club. Monique, why did you write a letter to Thad Allen?
Well, we thought it was, at Advocates for Environmental Human Rights, we thought it was extremely important that Thad Allen, as the National Incident Commander, not just be concerned about the data of regarding BP's processing of claims by fishermen, oyster farmers, and shrimpers, and businesses and communities along the Gulf region impacted by the disaster of its oil spill that's hemorrhaging from the Gulf. But that it was really important to understand the motivations that BP has with the contractual relationship, a company called ESIS that made it very clear on their website that their focus and goal is minimizing the amount of payout for claims for damages on behalf of its clients like BP. The information that Thad Allen was seeking in his letter to the BP CEO, Tony Hayward, was would fail to get at this real critical point, which is BP is utterly motivated to pay as little as possible, which would obstruct the recovery of people in the Gulf region. And it would also obstruct the restoration of our communities and the lives of so many people who've lost their livelihoods into the indefinite future.
I wanted to also go to Amory Lovins. He's at home in a very energy-efficient home, safely in Aspen in Colorado. He is the chief scientist and founder of the Rocky Mountain Institute. You are known as one of the most influential thinkers on energy, alternative energy in the world, Amory Lovins. What do you think needs to happen now?
Well, the president made two very interesting shifts in language in his speech. One is from just oil to talking about ending the addiction to fossil fuels. So that refers also to coal and ultimately, indeed, to natural gas. And second, he started a very interesting exercise in consensus building because he pointed out that this is our dependence on fossil fuel has cost not only to our economy, but also to our national security and our environment. And I think that starts a conversation of a new kind in energy policy, because we've always supposed people had to want the same things we wanted in energy for the same reasons. So if you had different priorities than somebody else, you couldn't agree on the outcome. What the president started to do here is to say, let's focus on outcomes, not motives. And then we can build a strong consensus. Whether you care most about national security or environment or economy, we ought to do the same things about energy. And if we do the things we agree about, then the things we don't agree about become superfluous.
Well, talk about what we do need to do. There is very little discussion in this country about what it would mean to come off a fossil fuel economy. Amory Lovins. Yeah.
Well, at Rocky Mountain Institute, our strategic focus is what we call reinventing FIRE, and that is mapping and driving the journey beyond fossil fuel, the transition from oil and coal and ultimately gas to efficiency and renewables. There are many things that need to be done to bring that about, but the oil part is already clear, and we'll publish an update of that. A lot has happened, and I say implementation is ahead of schedule, and the electricity part in about a year. But 6 years ago, we did publish a roadmap for getting the U.S. completely off oil by the 2040s at a cost roughly a fifth what we're paying for the oil right now, not counting any of its environmental, security, or other hidden costs. The two most powerful things we can do to get off fossil fuel in policy terms, well, the first is what we call fee-bates. That's a very powerful way to get efficient cars on the road faster, and therefore induce manufacturers to offer a lot more of them. Rebates were adopted in France 2 years ago, and in the first year, the sales of inefficient cars went down 42%. The sales of efficient cars went up 50%, a stunning result. And the way it works is when you go to the dealer to buy a vehicle of the size you want, the less efficient models of that size have a fee attached to them according to how inefficient they are, and those fees are used to pay a rebate on the more efficient models in that size class. So we widen the price spread enough that people will look at the whole life cycle fuel saving, not just the first year or two. By the way, there's another financial mechanism we could use for the low-income Americans who are having trouble affording efficient cars that they can afford to run. And we proposed a couple of ways 6 years ago for getting those families into very efficient, new, reliable, warranted cars that come with price-hedged gasoline and insurance all bundled in. And I think that is still on the table, and this would be a particularly good time to take a careful look at how to do it. This has huge social consequences. If, for example, the car ownership at that time were the same in African American and white households, the employment disparity would be cut about in half. The other big policy thing we need to do that's very powerful for saving electricity that is half made from coal and saving natural gas is to reward utilities for cutting our bill, not for selling us more energy, which is still the case in about 40 states. That's just as dumb as it sounds. We're rewarding the opposite of what we want. Oregon and California have a very good reform called decoupling and shared savings, and to varying degrees, a couple of dozen other states have adopted or are adopting it. I think it ought to be considered nationwide, because once you align incentives between utilities and customers, it really transforms their culture and behavior. Most of the electricity we use is now wasted and can be saved cheaper than just running an old coal-fired plant, even if the plant and the grid were free.
Amory Lovins, in a minute, I'm going to ask you to take us on a kind of tour of your house to talk about how you built your house and how you've saved energy. But I want to turn now to Michael Brune, Executive Director of the Sierra Club. His book is called Coming Clean: Breaking America's Addiction to Oil and Coal. Michael, assess President Obama's speech, what the U.S. is doing, what BP is doing, and what we need to do in the long run.
Sure. Well, the president's speech wasn't perfect, but it was quite good. You know, when you have someone, when you have the president talking from the Oval Office about how we won't give up on this fight, that we need to hold BP accountable, that we need a trust fund of billions of dollars that will compensate the victims of this disaster, and that he is committed to this fight for the long haul, for years. That's why we elected President Obama. The speech was not perfect. There was a lot that we needed to get from the president, more in terms of specifics and an ambitious goal. But it's comforting to hear someone who is echoing the values of millions of people who want to see the America move beyond our dependence on fossil fuels and are willing to organize and to fight for it. So that was good. What we didn't hear was the closing argument. What we didn't hear was a broad and ambitious but an achievable goal by which we can get off getting off oil in the next 20 years, where we can break our addiction to coal and we can transition to clean energy sources. What we also didn't hear was what we all can do as Americans, how we can actually achieve these goals that the president began to speak so eloquently about. Some of the things that we need to keep in mind are that we are fighting some of the richest companies in the history of the world. So Amory Lovins' policy suggestions are great. They're fantastic, and the Sierra Club supports fee-bates. We've been working on decoupling legislation in states all around the country. But we have to remember that the coal industry isn't just going to lie down and say, okay, you won, all you clean energy activists, you. And the oil industry isn't simply going to give up. So we know the playbook for how the oil industry operates.
Coverage yesterday on television, I'm seeing this new series of ads that are coming out from the coal industry, and it's women wearing hard hats. One woman says she's an environmentalist, and the reason she's in coal mining is because she deeply believes in clean coal. And clearly, you know, this is a time it's coming out as an alternative to the oil companies, right, to what's happening in the Gulf of Mexico.
Right.
So put together coal, and of course,